Before the Civil War, Francis Gaines Stowers, a slave owner in Hart County in North Georgia, had supported his family by owning and operating a farm, a cotton gin, a gristmill, and a sawmill. For a time, he had shipped his products by barge to markets in Augusta and Savannah. Later, he took advantage of the railroad system. Although not a wealthy man, Stowers was considered somewhat well off. He built a large one-story plain-style plantation house on his 300-acre tract. More importantly, he was respected and well thought of in the community. He had been the county sheriff, the local postmaster, and had served 2 terms in the Georgia legislature immediately before the outbreak of the war. After the war, with no steady workforce and most of his wealth gone, Stowers turned to sharecropping with some of his former slaves and decided to resume shipping cotton, flour, and other goods by a water route due to the destruction of the railroads. The U.S. Federal Census population records for 1860 show that Stowers was a 41-year-old farmer with a wife and 7 children from 1 to 17 years old. His oldest child, William, was working as a farmhand. Stowers owned real estate valued at $5,000 and had a personal estate worth $7,000. At that time, the value of slaves made up the bulk of the value of their owner's personal estate. A separate record, the 1860 slave schedule, revealed that Stowers owned 11 slaves. 7 of these were children 13 years old and younger, 2 were females aged 30 and 43, and 2 were males 43 and 60. For comparison, Hart County had a total of 6,137 people in 1860, 4,603 whites, 1,528 slaves, and 6 free colored persons. There were 217 slave owners. Only 6 of these owned 30 or more slaves. Of these, 1 owned 46, the most of any slave owner in the county. In October 1865, just 6 months after the end of the war, Stowers, along with 3 men from South Carolina, was arrested for the robbery and murder of a group of federal soldiers that were guarding a load of cotton that had been confiscated by the U.S. government. Suspicion fell on Stowers because he was the owner of a cotton barge at the ferry where the cotton was stored. Stowers and the others stood trial, were found guilty, and spent a total of 13 months in prison, after which they were released and returned home. Contemporary newspaper accounts noted that Stowers was too ill to attend the welcome home party given in the men's honor. Information recorded in the 1870 U.S. population census indicates that Stowers and his wife now have 5 children living at home. Their oldest son, William, had been killed in the war, and another son had married. Stowers' personal estate is valued at $700, and his real estate is worth $1,500. In just 10 years, he has lost 90% of the value of his personal estate and 70% of the value of his real estate. Altogether, almost 82% of his total wealth. To put these figures into context, according to Historical Statistics of the United States Millennial Edition, the value of land and buildings per farm in Georgia had fallen from $2,533 to $1,081, and in the South from $3,455 to $1,456 during the 10-year period from 1860 to 1870. Looking at things from this perspective, Stowers was doing better than the average farmer in Georgia and was on a par with other farmers throughout the South. Even so, he had experienced a devastating financial loss. Stowers remained in Hart County after the war, and according to information contained in the 1870 Census Volume 1, the statistics of the population of the United States, so did many of the local citizens. The total population in 1870 was 6,783, a gain of 646 people since 1860. The white population had grown approximately 5%, while the black population had increased slightly over 21%, indicating that no mass exodus had occurred for either race. The 1870 census was the last census in which Stowers would be enumerated. He died in the fall of 1871 from consumption contracted while in prison. He did not leave a will, and his appraisers returned a value of personal estate worth just $413. Even so, his wife and three adult children were able to remain living on the home place and keep their farm. The farm was sold between 1890 and 1900. The house was still standing in 1933. The waters of Lake Hartwell covered the home place and family graveyard sometime in the early 1960s. After the war, Stowers, perhaps like many others in the South, hoped that the decisions he made would leave him in a better position to support his family and possibly recover some of his lost wealth. Without a doubt, he could not have foreseen the consequences of his actions. If business history is a narrative of how people remake themselves, as Pop and Feldman argue, then the narrative of Francis Gaines Stowers and the choices he made, the actions he took, and the consequences he faced while trying to make a living after the Civil War fits the definition.